Okay, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to proceed to our main agenda, the general lecture from Professor Lo Xingkai, and the title is Publishing in International Journal while Conceptualizing the Research. As you know, the publication is common requirement for students and also researchers. So sometimes students get difficulties to publish and get rejected in the publisher. So today, Prof. Lo Xingkai will help you how to produce a good academic paper and publish it successfully. But before we start for the general lecture, we would like to introduce a brief introduction, the position of Prof. Lo Xingkai. She is the Associate Vice President for Graduate Study, Dean of Graduate School, Co-Director Analytic Assessment Research Center, Co-Director Center for Special Education Need and Inclusive Education, Chair Professor for Faculty Liberal Arts and Social Sciences. Continue, please. And this is the education of Prof. Lo. He get the first degree at the School of Economic and Finance Study, Macquarie University, Sydney, Australia, and he took the PhD at the School of Public Health at UC Berkeley. And his career, he was holding academic position in various universities in US, Australia, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. And he was also Associate Dean of Research at Deakin University, Melbourne, Australia. Welcome University. So, Prof. Lo, your lecture today is publishing in international journal while conceptualizing the research, and the student is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. Please open the PowerPoint file. The reason why I have chosen this topic is because I understand participants in this seminar most likely will come from different backgrounds, will have different expertise. And if I choose a topic in, for example, special education or in assessment, then only a limited number of you would be interested in that or would have the expertise to understand the technical details. And also, I mentioned in my previous session about university rankings. And of course, there are quite a number of factors related to how high a university can be ranked. But obviously, one of those factors is reputation of the university in general. I always mention that not only faculty members, research students are also an important group in the university that will contribute to the reputation of the entire university. And so it is very important and useful for postgraduate students, and in fact for supervisors as well, to know how to increase not only the number, the quantity, but also the quality of your publication in international journals. Many people came to me and said, many people came to me and said, Professor, I am a research student. I have to study courses. I have to start drafting a research proposal. And as Professor John Tran said, in our university, we ask students to pass what they call a qualifying examination before they can proceed to the thesis stage. So once I proceed to my thesis stage, I have to do data collection. And sometimes, especially during the pandemic, the data collection process has been seriously affected, and so on. So once I have my data, I have to analyze my data. I have to know what the data tells me, because whatever I write will have to be data driven. So that's almost towards the end of my study. How can I publish? How can I publish, especially the number of publications that you have? Well, just in case you are interested in, I have published so far a bit more than 250 journal articles in many, many different journals. So people ask, in what way can I increase the number of publications in international journals? And that's why I have chosen this topic to share with you. How can you publish as early as possible? Now, before I talk about how, let us ask the question, why do we do research? That's because of something called evidence-based. Now, evidence-based, many years ago, they talk about evidence-based medicine. More recently, they talk about evidence-based policy, evidence-based education. So where does evidence come from? Obviously, you can do your own research, so you do. But I am sure you are not the first one in the world who conducts this type of research, that the topic you have chosen, you are not the first one in the world to do it. And that's why you have to read. You have to look at research conducted by other people before you conduct your own research. So you read. Read means that those are the evidence generated by other people. Well, let me share with you. Let me show you two examples that could potentially be mistakes. The first one is from a mathematics education journal, right? I won't give you the technical details, because I do not mean to be pinpointing to any particular person, right? So this is just an example. It is not uncommon that you will find a statement like this. Now, let me just read out the statement. It was found that using, for example, a new teaching method can lead to achieving higher mathematics scores in, for example, an open examination. And then after that statement, a reference is quoted, sometimes more than one. They quote 2, 3, 4, 5 references. So in that sense, or from that perspective, people generally believe that the statement is true, because that statement is supported by an article. It's supported by someone who has conducted that sort of research before, because of the reference given. In fact, this type of statements is not uncommon in any journal, any type of journals that you can find. Now, another example is a journal in behavioral sciences. The statement says a gene was found to be positively associated with a behavioral problem. Once again, references are given. Right, so what is a potential problem associated with this kind of statements? Well, let me show you an example, which is, I would say this is a classic example, a classroom example, typical classroom example. This example is rather old, but this demonstrates the ideas very well. Now, this particular scholar was interested in the association between, he was interested in chronic pain, and he was interested in looking at how effective acupuncture can be in terms of managing chronic pain. So before he conducted his study, he tried to read. At his time, he found 51 papers. Now, in the next few slides, I'm going to show you that this scholar was very different from other scholars at that time. Instead of looking at the conclusion first, instead of looking at the introduction or the summary, the abstract first, he actually looked at the quality of each of the 51 studies that he read. Not only that, he tried to give a score to each of the 51 papers. Now, I will talk about the scores later, but basically, he designed a scoring method. The scoring method can give a score from 0 to 100 to each of the papers he read. And something very, very surprising or very interesting or very challenging or very, or should we say disappointed, out of the 51 papers, he found only 11 of the papers had a score bigger than 50. Now, if you use 50 as the cut point for pass or fail, obviously you can use another cut point, but if you use 50 as the cut point, that means only 11 of the 51 papers pass. The passing rate is roughly 20% or a little bit more than 20%, but that's still a very low percentage rate. In fact, out of the 51 papers, the highest score he found was only 62, which from a maximum of 162 is not a high score in any sense. So it is fair to say that the study quality of the 51 papers were not that good. Let me ask you a question. If you're reading a paper and the quality of the study is not that good, will you believe the results reported in that paper? Will you believe the results found? Well, of course, you can make your own judgment, you can make your own decision, but I can tell you that for me, I will try not to believe the results. In other words, I will only try to read and then believe the results of good quality studies. You say, Professor, in what way is this related to your topic? Your topic is how can we publish early? Now you're talking about quality of the papers. I mean, it seems to me that they are unrelated. Well, be patient. I'll be trying to link the two in a moment. But before I do that, some people ask me, they said, Professor, this sounds like a good example, but come on, there are only 51 papers. And this is talking about acupuncture at that particular time. Acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine was to some extent unknown to many people. So I do not consider this as an excellent example. I can understand what you're saying, but can you give me another example that is more representative? All right, if you want that, next slide, please. I will now give you another example by a group of researchers, and the head of the group is Professor Williamson. Basically, he collected 28 reviews, a total of more than 4,000 published articles, right? So the number is 50, it's not 51, more than 4,000. Once again, when he looked at these more than 4,000 papers from the 28 reviews, he concentrated on the study design, data collection, analysis methods, basically the methodology part. And I can share with you that these more than 4,000 papers actually were published in well-known journals with high impact factors. Right. So what did Professor Williamson and his research group find? Shocking statistics. In Williamson's study, only 20% met assessors' criteria for validity. Now, I mean, the sentence might be difficult to understand, but if I use very simple English, that means only 20% pass. All right. Remember that the acupuncture example I mentioned, 11 out of 51 papers got a score of 50 or above, roughly 20% pass. I will not go into the details for the time being. I will later, but this 20% met the assessor's criteria for validity basically means only 20% pass. So even when we are looking at a much bigger sample size, even when we are looking at more comprehensive journals, a list of journals, not just acupuncture, the result is quite similar. Now, in fact, more shocking is the second part of it. The first part, 20% pass, is shocking already, but more shocking. Let me read out the sentence. 80% of those inadequately designed or analyzed reported positive results, while only 25% of those adequately designed or analyzed reported positive results. Now, what does that mean? Okay, let's look at each of those words in the sentence. The first point, inadequately designed or analyzed. Inadequate means that they're not sufficient. All right. So basically means those papers that fail. Remember, 80% fail, 20% pass. You know, when I was teaching, when I was trying to supervise, when I was supervising my students, many of my students said, Professor, I can study these independently. I said, why? They said, look, I can just read the literature because my study is so similar to what have been done before. What I can do is whatever they have done because they have published in an international journal already. So what I can do is whatever they have done, whatever methodologies they use, I just follow. I just more or less repeat of what they have done. Now, this is quite dangerous because if you do that, if 20% pass, that means if you close your eyes and follow what exactly have been done before, there is a 80% chance that your paper will be classified as a failed paper. That's why I said you cannot just follow what people have done. You have to understand, you have to make sure that they have produced a quality study. And inadequately designed or analyzed means fail. Now remember, 80% of the papers fail, only 20% pass. And now this 80% of those inadequately designed means 80% of the 80%. That means overall 64%. Reported positive results. What do we mean by positive results? Of course, in any study, you have an hypothesis, you have some research questions that you would like to ask, right? For example, the mathematics scores example I quoted before. Usually, the hypothesis is that there is the null hypothesis is that there is no difference between the new teaching method and the old teaching method, or practically, they want to show the new teaching method is better than the old teaching method. So positive results means, yes, new teaching method is better. Or using the behavioral problem example, the gene problem, that a positive result means that, yes, that particular gene is associated with that particular behavioral problem. But that's, for those failed papers, they usually reported positive results. They usually reported what they wanted to say at the beginning, or they wanted to show at the beginning. Let's look at the second dot point. 25% of those adequately designed or analyzed. Adequately designed or analyzed means pass. In other words, those good papers, those quality papers, quality studies, only about a quarter of them will report positive results. We have to know that whenever we conduct research, we would like to find out the truth. We don't just report what you want to say. In fact, this is a very good example showing that for those quality studies, only about 25% of the time that they found something consistent with what they thought at the beginning of the study. Now, this is quite alarming. Of course, we are not trying to criticize any particular portion. We are not trying to pinpoint to any particular area of study. But before you believe the results, it is very clear that we have to make sure that that is a quality study before you allow yourself to trust the results. All right, now up to this point in time, I still haven't mentioned anything about publishing your own paper at the beginning. Now it is about time. So when you read, I said that acupuncture example, that particular scholar gave a score to each of the papers that he read. The way that we give a score to a paper is called critical appraisal. In other words, when we read a paper, we don't just read, we assess. We assess how good a paper is. Assessing the quality indirectly is assessing the strength of the evidence that's generated from the study. When do we conduct these critical appraisal? Critical appraisal means you critically appraise a paper, right? So when do we do it? We do it when we do literature review. Now, I'm sure if you are a postgraduate student, before you conduct your research, of course, you have to read the literature. And these days, once you have finished reading the literature, you try to summarize and write an introduction chapter, right? And then the background of your research, the rationale of the research, etc., etc. And then from there, you try to find a gap in the area, and then you try to fill the gap by answering some research questions, etc. So some people will say, look, I have finished my literature review, and I've written something called background, introduction, literature review, something like that. Can I just publish the literature review part of it? Now, usually these days, the answer is no. Unless you are a Nobel Prize winner, unless you are very, very famous in the particular area, unless you are invited by the editor of the journal to write a sort of a review. Otherwise, it is unlikely that you write something on the literature review, your paper will get accepted by a journal. Now, what I'm going to show you is by doing something related to critical appraisal, by using this critical appraisal approach, you can publish, you can write papers and get accepted by good journals. That means even before you started your own research, even before you pass the qualifying examination by Professor John Tran, you can start writing papers. This is the main reason why I designed this particular lecture today. You say, Professor, critical appraisal, how to write papers. All right, look at this particular table. Don't worry about the exact details, but in this table, I'm going to explain to you a concept which is called systematic review, which is something from critical appraisal to systematic review. Now, in this table, you'll find several rows and a number of columns. Each row represents one paper. So if you can look at the middle part of the table, I'm sure you can see 7 rows, right? Some rows easier for me to pronounce. For example, row number 4, that particular word is YIP. Yip, that is a Chinese name. That means the author, the first author of that paper has a surname of Yip. 7 papers, seven names, 7 rows. What about the columns? Look at the right-hand side column, the very, very right-hand side. You can see a score and a bracket percentage. That means for that particular paper, if I use a scoring method to give a score to that paper, the score from a score from 0 to 100. The first paper has a score of, the numbers are quite small. I think 63, is that right? 63. The second one is 33. I'm a little bit far away from the screen, so I hope I'm reading the numbers correctly. Yeah. And the third number 60, the fourth number 75, and so on. Now, that 75 or that 33 is the score given to that paper using a scoring method. If I use 50 as the cut point for pass-fail, I think 2 of them failed. That's the second one, 33, and the last one, 40. And in fact, if I use 60 as the cut point, then the fifth one has a score of 55, is also categorized as fail. Now you can see that if I am going to summarize or get a summary result, I mean, obviously every single paper should have a result section, a discussion section of its own. But of these 7 papers together, of course, I can have a summary of the summaries. I can have a summary of the results. And in this particular example, I probably will concentrate my discussion on paper number 4 because it has a score of 75. And perhaps to some extent, paper number 1, which has a score of 63. And the rest, maybe I will pay less attention, maybe even not mentioning at all, because especially for the 2 papers that fail. So critical appraisal means I give a score, I assess the quality of a single paper. And systematic review means that once I have given scores to a number of papers examining or looking at the same research question, then what are the general results found by these studies? Can I summarize these studies into one single statement by summarizing these papers? That is systematic review, right? So critical appraisal means referring to one paper. Systematic review means papers, a large number or a number of papers looking at the same research question, trying to answer the same research question. And I try to find a summary of the summaries. Systematic review is publishable. Rachel, can you open the other file? Not this one, not this one. Thank you. Now, in this particular, well, not a slide, I think this is a Word file. Just stop there, please. I am showing you a list of journal articles. All of them have something in common. I mean, this screen is not large enough, so you can see for the time being, but there are more than that, okay? There are 2 things in common. If you look at those highlighted in violet, all right, or purple, whatever you call it. John, is it violet? Is it correct? Yes, okay. You can see the 2 words systematic review or systematic reviews, all right? Every single paper has those 2 words. Those are all published, all in good journals. Impact factor 5 or something like that. I mean, I don't remember exactly, but you can check the impact factor of those journals yourself. So that's the first thing I want to highlight. Each of these papers are reporting of systematic reviews. A second common thing that you can find from these papers is something highlighted in blue. And that is, I think it's something called LOSK. That must be a name of the person. Professor Kong, whom do you think that person is? Oh, Lo Xingkai, all right, okay. All right. All right, so you can see that Lo Xingkai, for each of the papers listed here, is the last or corresponding or senior author of the paper. And the first name of the paper It's a different name. The first one is Kwan, the second one is Carl, the third one is Choi, etc., etc. All those first authors were either my PhD students or my postdoctoral fellows. So for each of my PhD students, each of my PhD students or each of my PhD of the postdoctoral fellows, I will ask them a question. Now, would you like to publish when you are only conducting your literature review, which means you still haven't had your full proposal ready yet? You are still reading the literature, right? Well, I mean, everyone will have to do that. I have never heard of anyone conducting research but not doing literature review. And that is at the beginning of your study, at the beginning of your PhD in this case. All of them said yes. So I said, right, okay, so why don't you conduct a systematic review rather than a literature review? Because literature reviews are not publishable, or mostly not publishable, but systematic reviews are publishable. Rachel, can you just keep moving? Of the same file? Yeah, it's basically it's the same thing, right? So I'm just showing you more and more and more. Okay, all right. There are more. It's a long list, so you can stop there because we don't want to spend time on the rest of the list. So we can go back to the PowerPoint file, please. All right. So if you are interested in publishing at the very beginning of your study, if you are interested in publishing even before you finalize your research proposal, please consider systematic review. In fact, PhD students at the Education University of Hong Kong are strongly encouraged to do so. And in the last few years, we have an increasing number of students who were able to publish even in year one, right? Year one in our university, Professor John Chen can tell you more, but year one usually is the year that they attend taught courses, classroom taught courses. They have to attend courses like research methods, conceptualization of research, etc., etc. And before my time, before I went to the Education University of Hong Kong, no one was publishing when they are at the first year of the study. Now we have, I don't know how many, now we have quite a number. I mean, I don't keep track of the statistics, but we have quite a number. And that's why I'm here to encourage you to do this. If you are interested in doing this, if you are not interested in this, that's fine. But if you're interested in this, here, I'm going to share with you a little bit more about the technical details. Next one, please. All right. Now, systematic reviews comes from critical appraisal, because you have to give a score to each paper before you can summarize several papers. So you have to first understand how to conduct a critical appraisal. That means how to give a score to a paper, how to assess the quality of the study. Unfortunately, there are many scoring methods. Don't ask me how many, because there are so many. I don't even know how many. Many. All right, many. But basically, they can be categorized into the following. That means if you look at each of those dot points, then the scoring method for each of those dot points will be different, and sometimes quite different, very different. One type of critical appraisal or scoring method is for qualitative studies. In our university, I believe, John, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe more than 50% of our PhD students actually are using qualitative methods than quantitative methods. Now, increasing number of students are using mixed methods, a mix of those two, but still, I think qualitative method is more common, right? So I would very much like you to learn how to score or to give a score to a qualitative study. If you want to learn that, I will show you later. The second type of critical appraisal or scoring method is for intervention studies. In fact, intervention studies It's very, very common in medical studies. I mean, in many of my publications were in intervention studies. As I told you before, I have been categorized by Stanford University under the category of general and internal medicine. So many of my systematic reviews are in intervention studies. In fact, not only in medicine, in education, the teaching method example I quoted before was a perfect example for intervention studies. Well, in that particular study, they were comparing a new teaching method with an old or existing teaching method. So a comparison. They have two groups of students. One group taught using the new method, taught method. And so somehow, even though they are not injecting something into the body of the students, they are teaching, there's some sort of intervention. So I'm sure there are increasing number of examples you can find from educational studies. In engineering as well. In physics, I don't know. Well, I have to learn from you. But anyway, I think in economics, in many other type of studies, you will be able to find intervention studies examples. The third dot point is something called observational studies. Now, I'm not teaching research design, so I will just briefly say that even for observational studies, there are different scoring methods for cohort studies or case control studies. In case you don't know what is the difference, good, because you will invite me to come back again to teach you more on those. But basically, for those who don't know what is cohort, what's case control, you don't have to today. I'm just trying to show you that different types of study designs will need different scoring methods. And these days, I believe many research are using questionnaires, using measuring instruments, and testing the reliability and validity of the measuring instruments or the questionnaires will be very important. Not only important, it's indispensable. Anyway, so there are also different scoring methods for measuring instruments, etc. So the conclusion or summary up to this point is, if you want to publish systematic review, the first thing you need to do is know how to conduct critical appraisal. And if you want to conduct critical appraisal, you must first of all know what sort of research design will you potentially be using in your study. And then concentrate on that particular type of research design and learn scoring methods for that type of design. And then try to do the critical appraisal yourself on the papers that you have read. That's the procedure. Now, I was, pardon me, but I was not anticipating this type of setting before I came. I was expecting, I'm not saying that I need it now, but I was expecting that I was able to sit in front of a computer that is linked to the internet so that I can go to the web and then show you something. Is it possible? But if not, that's okay. The reason why I need to do that is because I'm going to show you something very interesting and very useful. Can I go to Google? Oh, thank you. Now, your colleague is helping me to use Google, to use internet. I have nothing to offer her now. So in front of all of you, I I can go there. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now, what I'm going to demonstrate now is to make a suggestion of two websites. And both of these websites have scoring methods available for different types of designs. The first thing that I would like to suggest is when you are in, for example, Google, it doesn't have to be Google, but if you are in Google, what you can do is just type critical appraisal, very easy, and hit return. You will find many websites suggested to you. And the first one I would like to suggest is something is ox.ac.uk. OX, I'm sure you will be able to imagine what that means, Oxford University. And in fact, under that, it says critical appraisal tools. So my suggestion is just go to that particular web page. I will accept all cookies. Now, critical appraisal tools, I said many of my students are using qualitative design. So go down, critical appraisal worksheets. In fact, worksheets means scoring methods. Can you see here, critical appraisal of qualitative studies? Yes. Hit return. Did I? Oh, this is PDF. Oh, all right. Okay. All right. Yeah. I would. Yeah. Right. Okay. Oh, good. Yeah. That one. Yeah. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Now, this is the critical appraisal scoring method for qualitative studies, designed by Oxford University, the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine. And this particular worksheet will show you how to give a score. In fact, basically, the way to give a score is there are several, in this particular worksheet, I think there are 10 questions asked by the worksheet, asked by the scoring method. Then for each question, you try to find from the paper, whether the paper has done that, whether the paper has satisfied that requirement, whether the paper has sort of, you can find the answer from that paper. If the answer is yes, you click yes. If the answer is no, or you cannot find, you click no. Or if you are not sure, you can click uncertain. Right here, unclear, all the same. And in fact, the beauty of this worksheet is that it not only asks the question, it will also show you where do I find the information from the paper. Now, I won't go through all the questions, and I suggest you read through this yourself and read through the website yourself. This is a very good website. This is a very good scoring method, very good worksheet. I have only 1 hour to talk about this, right? I have 10 minutes left, so I do not have any intention to go into the details. In fact, in 1 hour, it is not possible for me or for anyone to go through all the technical details. In fact, back in Hong Kong, I spent 3 sessions, each session 3 hours, a total of 9 hours to go through the whole thing. And I either invite you to go to Hong Kong to attend my sessions in Hong Kong, or a better option is you invite me to come back again. All right, and then we can, in fact, it's not only to go through this in a lecture or in a seminar like this. In Hong Kong, I divide students into groups and then ask different groups to read different papers, to try this, and then come up with the scores, and then involve in the discussions, etc., etc., etc. And this is the way to learn. This is one website. In fact, if I go back to the other web, I won't go back, but in fact, this is in English. If you visit the website yourself, you can see that this particular worksheet has been translated into several languages. I vaguely remember German, French, Chinese, but no Indonesian so far. Maybe some of you could work with the research group in Oxford to translate this into Indonesian. Yeah, that would be something very interesting. Huh? And you're contributing. Yeah, good. Now, this is an example on qualitative study. And I mentioned in my slide that there are different scoring methods for intervention studies, for different types of design. And I also strongly encourage you to look at the rest of the website on different types of design. This is a very useful website because it not only provides you with these working sheets, it also has some references. It also describes critical appraisal. It is sort of a teaching manual in some sense. So I think it's quite useful. I said I would like to suggest 2 web pages to you. Now, the Oxford one is one that I have already gone through. I would like to go back to the Google and show you another website that I think is also very interesting and very useful. I have looked at many, of course, I have done this myself before. I've gone through, I've read through many websites myself, and I found these 2 most useful. And the Oxford one is not necessarily better than the other one, but one of the 2. So I'm going to show you the second one that is also very useful. How can I go back to the Google, please? All right. Now, I typed critical appraisal before, but I think I need to type it again. No, here. Critical appraisal. Yeah. All right. So let me just. Now, apart from Oxford, I would like to suggest you another website. Here. The second one is called, let me go into it. What does that mean? Block. Okay, so I don't know why, but anyway, you try to go into that. I don't know how, but this particular website is called CEBMA. The C stands for center. EBMA means evidence-based management. Right? The other one is medicine. Oxford one is medicine. This is management. I don't know why I cannot go into it. Back in Hong Kong, I was able to go into this particular website. So once again, if you are able to get into it, go into it, you will find some. They don't call worksheets. They call checklists. Basically the same thing. Scoring methods, and those scoring methods. They also have scoring methods for qualitative studies, for intervention studies, etc., etc. The scoring methods are slightly different, but the basic ideas are the same. The Oxford checklist, the Oxford worksheet asks 10 questions. The Center for Evidence-Based Management, the same type of design, qualitative design, they ask 12 questions. Again, yes, no, or not unclear. They say uncertain or something like that, right? But basically the same idea. How do you get a score from 0 to 100? Very easy. A yes, you give a score of 1. No, you give a score of 0. Unsure, uncertain, unclear, whatever that they call it, you give a score of 0.5. Then you add up the total, and divide by the number of questions. Of course, then you will come up with a percentage from 0% to 100%. And that's how you can get a score from 0 to 100. So this is how you do it. And if you do it, you will be able to publish. But I need to alert you that systematic review cannot be done by yourself alone. Systematic review will need to be done by at least 3 people. If you still remember the list of publications that my doctoral students or my postdoctoral fellows published together with me, in fact, the student or the postdoctoral fellow must be the first author. And I usually was the last or senior author. And in between, if you remember, there are other co-authors, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. That's because systematic review will have to be conducted by a group of researchers together. Why? Because if you are the only person giving a score to that paper, some people might say that you are biased. You give a score of 1, but I will give a score of 0 to that particular question. You say yes, I say no, right? So the way to do the systematic review or critical appraisal is you conduct that critical appraisal, you give a score to that paper independently. And the rest of the group, except for the senior author, in my example, except for myself, all the students, all the postdoctoral fellows will conduct the critical appraisal independent of each other. And then at the end of the day, when they finish giving the scores, they come to me together and I ask them for the first question, how many of you say yes? How many of you say no? Hopefully all of them will say yes or no. That's good. But if Professor Kong said yes, Professor John Tran said no, I will ask them why, and then try to discuss within the group to come up with the final decision whether we should give a score of 1 or 0 or 0.5 to question number 1, etc., etc. That's why a group of researchers will be required to conduct critical appraisal and systematic reviews. In fact, there are many, many things about the systematic reviews. Some of you might have already heard of something called meta-analysis. Anyway, but I won't go into the details once again because of time limit. But please remember, the earlier you can publish, the better in many sense. In fact, students told me that not only that they got 1 more publication, they are more confident. You know, I never thought that I could publish. Now I can. This is something very encouraging. And look, I can even publish at the beginning. This is only my first year of study. I can publish. So I will keep publishing. You know, that gives them the momentum. So if you are a supervisor yourself, I also encourage you to encourage your students to publish at the very beginning. As you can see, my talk limited to 1 hour. This is not a complaint about I have a very poor choice of diction or limited choice of diction, but with only 1 hour, I try to talk about this topic from 2 perspectives. The first perspective is I try to talk a little bit about the technical details, like how many designs, what website can you get those scoring methods, etc. And another perspective is try to convince you or try to encourage you to be more productive, to write more papers. And I want to do both in the same session. That's why I sort of organize my talk in such a way. Usually back in Hong Kong when I'm teaching, when I conduct my formal lectures, formal seminars, this is not the way I teach. I mean, I give them formal lectures. I talk about each of those scoring methods in very, very detail. I give them homework assignments, ask them to form groups to do things together, etc. To report to me what do they learn, and hopefully eventually, if they would very much like to conduct a systematic review and publish, I try to form groups, not I mean, usually the group leader is not myself, because I'm not in that area. Usually the group leader is a professor like Professor Kong or Professor Tran or some other professors, but I try to link them together to form groups to publish. And being the Dean of the Graduate School, I find it very useful in terms of managing student performance, in terms of increasing the number of publications for the university as a whole, because, you know, how many staff do we have? How many doctoral students do we have? Obviously, we have more doctoral students than the number of academic staff. And so if each doctoral student can publish 1 paper, 2 papers, or 3 papers during the entire duration of their study, it will be very good for the university. So somehow I have chosen this topic and organized my talk in such a way for the purposes or for the reason that I have just explained to you. And I hope you appreciate this form of talking. You understand my logic. You appreciate how I feel about this collaboration. I mean, when we talk about collaborations, I talk about offering doctoral scholarships. Obviously, people like that. But I think it's not the only way we can work together. Offering scholarship is only one way, but trying to help you to help yourself, trying to teach you to help yourself to publish, to conduct research is another way, and probably can benefit more people than giving out scholarships. How many scholarships can we give out every year? 1, 2, 3, 4. But how many people can I teach to write papers? 500, 300? So somehow, the reason why Professor Tran and Professor Kong and Rachel and I come this time is not only to share with you the scholarship opportunities, but also to say that, look, in a medium term, we should talk more about this kind of research collaborations than scholarships. If I come here the first day and talk about systematic review, maybe not many people might want to come. But if I talk about scholarships, people know that now we are very sincere. We are very keen to work with you. And then we move on to talk about more technical research collaborations. That's the way 2 universities should work together. That's the path, the pace. Now it's about 12. I think that clock is correct. It's 6 minutes past 12. In order to avoid that gentleman coming to stop me talking, I will stop talking myself and give the microphone back to the chair. And thank you very much for your attention. And I wholeheartedly, from my heart, invite you to conduct research with the Education University of Hong Kong. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the session of question and answer. Is there any question from the audience in this room? Bu Meli, please.
Thank you so much, Professor Lo, for your wonderful lecture. I am Melia Sari from Mathematics Education Study Program. I found that the critical appraisal is very, very useful, especially when I teach my master students to write systematic literature review. It's very difficult to, for them to do some critical, to critique these papers that were written by experts. Yeah, and because this is our part of our culture, probably we are very reluctant to, criticize something that is already written by an expert. So these tools are very useful. Thank you. And my question is, after you score these papers using that form, is there any minimum score that you become like the standard, something like that? So what score is minimum so that this paper is selected? And then my next question is, to publish a systematic literature review paper in a reputable journal, is there any minimum number of papers to be reviewed? Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I have already prepared answers for these two questions because these two questions have been asked so many times before. So I have standard answers, so to speak. The first question about the minimum score. In fact, I would like to suggest another way of writing your discussion. I personally do not use any cutting scores. What I usually do once you have done the systematic review, obviously you need a discussion of the discussions. So what I usually do is I conduct something called sensitivity analysis. And what is that? I start usually, say for example, I will answer the second question later, but for example, if I have reviewed a total of 20 papers and 10 of them gave positive results and 10 of them gave negative results, I would report that, say, look, in general, only 50% of the papers published so far reported positive results. So the results or the conclusion is not that conclusive, right? Then what I do is, look, what about if I concentrate on papers with a score of 70 or above? Will I get 50% positive and 50% negative, or most of them are negative? Then I try to move that 70% cut point to 60, 50 to see whether the result or the conclusion will change if I change using different cut points. And this is what I meant by sensitivity analysis. And usually by doing this, my experience so far is that you will be able to find many of the so-called conclusions will be quite different if you use different cut points. And unfortunately, very unfortunate, that usually the higher the cut point you use, more negative results. And that is, to some extent, something good for you, because that is the argument for my research team to do that research. Because, look, the results are so inconclusive. We really need to do a study that will overcome all the so-called drawbacks, limitations of the period studies. You know, why that paper got only 50? Why only 33? Why not 75? Why not 80? Must be because of something that they have not done or they have done incorrectly. Must be. Otherwise, they will have a high score. So if they only score 50, only 45, only 62, then I try to see, look, what else can I do in order to improve? Then I will incorporate those kind of improvements in my study or my students' study. This is how we identify, one way to identify gaps in the research. Gaps sometimes is not necessarily questions that have not been answered. Sometimes can be that question has been raised and answered, except that the conclusion is inconclusive. In terms of your second question, I hope I'm answering your question. I usually, personally, I do not recommend using a single cut point to make the decision. The second question you raised was also very, very important. What is the minimum number of papers that need to be included in my systematic review for the journal to accept my paper? I think that's your question. Once again, I do not have a golden number for you, because sometimes we can find a systematic review of 50 papers, and the systematic review with the fewest number of papers that I've ever seen up to this point in time, 4. So even 4 papers review, they can publish a systematic review. But of course, it is very unusual. Of course, that you have the so-called conclusion in your systematic review will have to be something very groundbreaking. You must report something that's absolutely new, that no one has ever paid any attention to. You cannot just say, oh, they have 4, so I have 4. Usually 4 is not enough, usually. Now, my experience is, once again, I do not want to give a golden number, but my experience is if you have a double-digit number, that people will not be too critical. Right? Obviously, the more the better. But on the other hand, if you don't find many, that's also a good thing for you, because not so many people have done that research before. So it's good for me to do it. Right? So my suggestion is writing a paper. John, I'm sure John will tell you more about tomorrow, about writing papers tomorrow. But writing papers is like writing stories. You have find many papers. You can tell a story in this way. You only find 4, 5, 6 papers. You can write your story in another way. So it's the way you write stories. So don't worry too much about the number of papers that you can find. Many, good, because obviously the so-called conclusions are more convincing. Few, also good. Not many one have done this before. It's time for my research team to do it. But once again, if you can find, and in fact, not only the number of papers, number of years. Say someone has already done that systematic review before, but then he did that systematic review 20 years ago. There must be some update, right? Especially lately, in the last 10, 15 years, the number of publications worldwide has increased so dramatically. I don't know the exact numbers, but so many papers published in the last 10, 20 years. An update is also important. And my experience is sometimes, not always, but sometimes, and the conclusions that you find in the update is quite different from what they found 20 years ago. At least in one of the papers that I showed you, my own papers, we found something absolutely opposite to what they found 20 years ago. And that's also good. Thank you. I hope I'm answering your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Flo. Is it good, Bu Melly? Thank you. Then we go to the last question before we close this session. Ibu Silviana Shah from the Zoom. Would you like to ask your question directly to Prof. Flo?
Okay, but sorry, I cannot turn on video right now. Is it okay?
Oh, it's fine.
Okay, thank you, Professor. It's so awesome and very useful presentation. I have a question. How do we know that our paper published in Scopus Q1, Q2, Q3, or Q4? Is there any requirement to be Q1 or Q2 or Q3? Thank you.
Q1, Q2, Q3 is a quartile. So the lowest rank is Q4 and the highest rank is Q1 in Scopus Index.
Yeah, Scopus, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it is not necessarily confined to any definition. I'm sure Professor Kong and Professor John Chen can also answer this question. You know, let me tell you something else before I refer back to this question. All right. Some people ask me, especially PhD students, they ask me, Professor, what is more important, quantity or quality? Should I publish many papers, and they are primarily in journals with lower impact factors, or should I just publish 1 or 2 papers? But these 2 papers, 1 or 2 papers, are in the top of the list. All right, the highest impact factor in that particular disciplinary area. Many people ask me this question. Now, I have a general answer to that question. Specific answers will need to be decided based on the background of the student, the area of the study, etc. But I have one general answer to that question. If the student has never published before, he has a young gentleman or young lady who just finished his or her master's degree, or even just the bachelor degree and proceed to do the PhD directly, very inexperienced, then I say, look, in any journal with an impact factor, even 0.1 impact factor, you can get it published. Because at your stage, you need to build up your confidence. You need the first paper. Once you have the first paper, you will continue to have the second and third and fourth. If you are a first year PhD student and you aim at a journal of impact factor 20.5, come on. Even when you finish your degree, you probably will not be able to publish in that journal. You'll be very disappointed. You will be discouraged. And so why don't aim that high at the very beginning and publish. And then once you have the first, you have the second, then you have one or two, maybe even three, then you can start thinking about journals of higher rank with high impact factors. You know, people ask me, Professor, you published more than 250 by now. Please tell me how. I would like to share with you. I would like to ask you a question. You know that, well, I tell everyone, I mean, it's in my CV. I tell everyone that I published more than 250. Do you know how many papers that have been rejected? I never told people. Oh, it's a secret. The only thing I can tell you is the number is also very large. So quantity and quality, there must be a trade-off. But at different stage of your career, the trade-off strategy will be different. I don't know your background. I mean, I'm sorry, this lady, but I don't know your background. I don't know many of you, so I cannot give you a very specific answer. But I don't think that people should always look at high, low, or how high, what's the ranking. Of course, that's important. I'm not trying to downplay the importance of it. But sometimes I also look at who are the potential audience. You know, international journals usually are written in English. And I have some papers, not many, but I have some papers written in Chinese. And those journals are not listed I mean, our university, the Research and Development Office, they have a list that we have to publish in that list before they are being recognized. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes I publish in journals outside the list. For example, in mainland China, I want to help the poor. I want those people to read. I want the politicians to read. I want those people to read my paper, to read my report. So, and I know that they will not read the International Journal of Special Education or something like that. So I write in Chinese. Sometimes I don't even write papers. I write a report because I want to target those people. So I think it's very important that the so-called ranking Q1, Q2, they are important. Once again, please do not misunderstand me. I'm not trying to downplay the importance, but I think we need to be very strategic. When, where, how, at what stage, use different type of strategies is important. I would provide you with this general response, but if you tell me more about yourself, your background, etc., all those, I might be able to provide you with more specific suggestions and guidance. I hope my answer is not too disappointed for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So it is quite interesting, but Prof. Dedi, we should invite Prof. Lo again in a special lecture, not a general lecture, in a class at postgraduate program. Okay. Yes, he said he will come for 3 course, for example, so he can more detail discussing about academic writing. Okay,
So
thank you.
I was trying to advertise myself.
Thank you, Prof. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to come to the conclusion of our general lecture today. So, systematic literature review has to conduct at least 3 writers, yes. And for you, student, you can start your writing because it's eager you to write and publish in the right journal, no matter the how rank is it, yes. And then this strategy will build a good experience for you, and then you will be a good writer, an experienced writer. Thank you, Prof. Lo. Ladies and gentlemen, please give applause for Prof. Lo Singkai from Education University of Hong Kong. And I give it back the floor to our host. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you, Professor Lo Singkai as our guest lecturer and Dr. Mutia Delina as our moderator today. We will move on to the next agenda. There will be a token of appreciation from Universitas Negeri Jakarta for Education University of Hong Kong. We would like to invite Professor Dr. Dedi Purwana and Professor Lo Singkai to the stage for the token appreciation.
Ladies and gentlemen, next we would like to take some pictures to capture this moment. So please, everyone, every guest in this room, please come forward because we are going to take pictures.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, delegates of Education University of Hong Kong, all of the attendees. Ladies and gentlemen, after having a fruitful, engaging discussion and eye-opening blended general lecture, we have finally come to the end of our event for today. I, Abdul Aziz Al-Hadi and Dwita Andini from Duta Universitas Negeri Jakarta would like to give our gratitude and say farewell. Thank you very much for your participation today and see you tomorrow on the second day of general lectures that will be delivered by Professor Kong Secheng and Professor Trent John. Good afternoon and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you. Aduh. Ya, udah muncul tuh. Kan yang pajak gue. Gue itu kan pajak gue. Aduh sih. Budi gimana kemarin? Hope it's fine. It's not. Don't worry ya. It's okay. Tomorrow, the last you wrong. You wrong. But now it is okay. Yang wrong itu salah. Kemarin kan melakukan kesalahan dan kalau orang ini kan one mistake. Iya. Mistake. One mistake. Ya, bukan mistake lagi. Itu mah nyanyian kita itu mistake. Kemarin kan you worry banget ya. You many problem. Your head is raklek. Aduh. Dan ini apa? Sorry gue tadi ini ada ini sedikit ya, Bro. Tepatnya gue pakai sedikit ya, Bro. Bro. Gue ini pacar gue kemarin udah di oh,